She had lived in silence for 2 decades, but silence never meant peace. For 20 long years, every beat of her heart carried the weight of betrayal, humiliation, and a fire that refused to die out. The world had moved on, people had forgotten, and the man responsible for destroying her life had built his empire on the ashes of her broken dreams. But she never forgot. She waited, she planned, and she endured. Revenge, for her, was not an impulse. It was an art, and 20 years was the perfect time to sharpen the blade. Back then, she was young, full of hope, and foolish enough to trust him. He had promised her love, loyalty, and forever. She gave him everything, her time, her youth, her secrets. But to him, she was nothing more than a stepping stone, a pawn in a ruthless game of greed and ambition. He betrayed her in the most public way possible, using her, discarding her, and then framing her for crimes she did not commit. She lost her reputation, her freedom, and even her family turned their backs on her. The day she was taken away in handcuffs, he stood in the crowd, smiling faintly, knowing his plan had worked. That image of his smirk had haunted her every night since. In prison, she had no choice but to harden. She learned patience from the ticking of the clock, endurance from the cold walls, and cunning from observing the worst of humanity. Each passing year stripped her of softness, replacing it with steel. She studied law, psychology, and finance with whatever scraps of books she could get her hands on. Knowledge became her weapon. She befriended no one but listened to everyone, collecting stories of betrayal, greed, and vengeance. She promised herself that if she ever walked out of those gates, she would not waste a single breath on forgiveness. When the day finally came, 20 years later, she stepped into the sunlight with nothing but a small bag and eyes that carried storms. The world was different now, faster, louder, more ruthless, but she adapted quickly. She tracked him down with ease. He was richer than ever, his empire sprawling across cities, his name celebrated in magazines and on billboards. To the world, he was a success story, a philanthropist, a man who rose from nothing. To her, he was still the same monster, only now more dangerous because of the mask he wore. She didn't rush. She never would. Instead, she infiltrated his world quietly. She took a new name, a new identity, and began working her way into his empire, starting from the bottom. She became invisible, the kind of person no one paid attention to: an assistant, a secretary, a shadow. Yet, from the shadows, she learned everything. She studied his weaknesses, his enemies, his habits. She discovered he had a daughter, the only person in his life he seemed to care for genuinely. That knowledge pierced her heart with temptation, but she wasn't cruel for cruelty's sake. No, her revenge had to strike his soul, not an innocent one's. She found the cracks in his empire. Illegal dealings hidden beneath polished contracts, bribes tucked neatly into charity foundations, lies wrapped in layers of public goodwill. Piece by piece, she gathered evidence, threading together a noose he wouldn't see until it was too late. Still, she wanted him to feel something before the end. Not just fear, but recognition. She wanted him to look into her eyes and remember the woman he had crushed, the life he had stolen. The night she revealed herself came like a storm. He had been hosting a gala, celebrating yet another business victory, surrounded by power and wealth. She appeared before him in a gown of deep red, her hair pinned elegantly, her smile cold and unshakable. At first, he didn't recognize her. Time had changed them both. But when their eyes locked, when the shadows of memory stirred, his face paled and his confident mask cracked. He whispered her name, trembling as if seeing a ghost. She leaned close enough for only him to hear and said, 20 years, and I never stopped thinking of this moment. His breath hitched, and in that instant, he knew something terrible was about to happen. The walls closed in quickly after that night. Investigations launched, media scandals erupted, partners abandoned him, and his empire began to collapse. Every secret she had uncovered became public. Every betrayal he had committed returned to devour him. He tried to fight back, but the evidence was overwhelming, the timing perfect, and his allies gone. Within months, the man who once seemed untouchable was reduced to nothing, a name dragged through the mud, a fortune seized, and a legacy destroyed. When the authorities finally took him away in handcuffs, she stood in the crowd, just as he once had. Only this time, the roles were reversed. He caught sight of her, and though rage burned in his eyes, there was something else too. Fear, disbelief, and the bitter realization that she had beaten him at his own game. She did not cheer, nor did she smile. Revenge wasn't sweet. It was sharp, bitter, and heavy. But it was justice. For 20 years she had carried the weight of what he did to her, and now, finally, she could breathe. She turned away from the spectacle, her heart neither light nor burdened, but steady. She had waited 2 decades for this moment, and though the world would never know the full story, she knew. And that was enough. For weeks after his arrest, she kept her distance, watching from the shadows as the media devoured him. The mighty lion had become prey, torn apart by the very system he once manipulated. But for her, it wasn't enough. A man like him didn't deserve a prison cell and 3 meals a day. He deserved to feel what she had felt: hopelessness, abandonment, and the cruel laughter of the world closing in. She visited him. Disguised as his legal aid, she entered the prison where he now sat, his once polished suit replaced by a dull gray uniform. When he saw her walk into the dim room, the guards stepping out to give them privacy, his eyes widened. He looked older, weaker, but the hatred in his gaze still flickered like fire. "You think this makes us even?" he sneered, his voice hoarse. "You've ruined me, but I'll rebuild. Men like me always do. You'll never escape what you are." She leaned forward, her face inches from his, her voice low but sharp as a blade. "You think this is the end?"
No.
"This is just the beginning. 20 years ago, you stole my life. Now I'll steal every breath of dignity you have left." He laughed, a hollow sound, but there was fear beneath it. "You'll never kill me. You don't have it in you." She smiled, a slow, knowing smile. Death would be mercy. In the following months, she began pulling strings from the outside. The cell he was placed in was not random, it was carefully arranged. She made sure he was surrounded by men he had once betrayed in his rise to power, men who recognized his face from old deals gone wrong. Whispers spread quickly in the prison halls. The great man had fallen, and debts needed to be settled. Nights became long for him, filled with shadows, threats, and the constant dread of footsteps approaching his bed. And she watched, always a step ahead, ensuring no one killed him. Not yet. She wanted him alive long enough to suffer. But then came the twist no one saw coming. One evening, she returned home to find an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a single photo, his daughter, bound and gagged, fear in her eyes. And beneath it, a note written in his unmistakable handwriting. "Two can play this game. If you want her alive, you'll set me free." Her blood ran cold. The man she thought broken still had allies outside, strings left to pull. He was cornered, but not powerless. She faced the cruelest dilemma: abandon the innocent girl, or undo the revenge she had spent 20 years perfecting. For days, she didn't sleep. Her mind was torn in pieces. The daughter was innocent, yes, but saving her meant undoing everything. Losing him to freedom would make her sacrifice meaningless. But allowing harm to come to the girl would turn her into the very monster she had sworn to destroy. Finally, she made her choice. At dawn, she set the plan into motion, one final, deadly game. She arranged a meeting at an abandoned warehouse, sending word through his remaining allies that she would deliver what he wanted. When he arrived, escorted by desperate men who thought he still had power, he found her waiting in the shadows. And there, tied but unharmed, was his daughter. His relief was instant but short-lived, because as he stepped forward, his men began dropping one by one, taken down by the silent, efficient strike of mercenaries she had hired. Within moments, it was just him, her, and the trembling girl. She released the daughter, placing her safely behind her. Then she turned to him, her eyes colder than ever. You wanted her to pay for your sins, she whispered. But I won't let your poison spread to her. This ends tonight. He lunged, desperate, but he was slower now, weaker. She didn't need a weapon. Her every move was calculated. Within seconds, he was on the ground, gasping, defeated. She crouched over him, her voice steady. You once said men like you always rebuild. Not this time. The last sound he heard was the click of her phone. She had broadcasted the entire confrontation live. His confession, his threats, his downfall, streamed to the world. By the time authorities arrived, his daughter was safe, and his reputation was not only destroyed but forever stained as the monster he truly was. She walked away that night, not with the sweetness of victory, but with the silence of finality. The revenge she had nurtured for 20 years was complete, not because she killed him, but because she left him alive with nothing. No power, no allies, no mask to hide behind. And as she disappeared into the night, she carried with her not joy, but freedom. For the first time in 20 years, she was no longer defined by his betrayal. She was something far more dangerous. She was untouchable. Months passed after his final public downfall, but something inside her was restless. Revenge had been her fuel for 20 years. Without it, she felt empty. The world believed the story was over. He rotted in prison with no chance of release, his daughter distanced from him, the empire gone. Yet she knew him too well. Men like him never surrendered, not even in chains. And she was right. Rumors began surfacing, guards bribed, whispers of an escape plan, hidden funds never discovered. She smiled when she heard, because what no one else knew was this: she had left those loopholes open deliberately. She wanted him to try, and he did. One stormy night, he escaped, bloody and desperate, hiding in shadows like a rat. His instinct drove him to the only place he thought was safe, an old villa outside the city. But when he entered, expecting refuge, he froze. Candles burned along the walls, casting flickering light on photographs, hundreds of them. Every picture was of him. Young, old, smiling, furious, sleeping. Every angle of his life documented, studied, obsessed over. And at the center of the room stood her, waiting, calm as if she knew the exact moment he would arrive. You planned this, he whispered, realization dawning, horror spreading across his face. Yes, she said simply. You didn't escape. I let you out. His breath quickened.
Why?
Why drag this out? You've destroyed me already. She stepped closer, her voice low, controlled, terrifyingly calm. Because I wanted you to know that for 20 years, while you thought you were free, you weren't. Every step you took, every deal you made, every smile you faked, I was there, pulling strings. You never had power. You only had what I allowed you to have. His knees buckled. The weight of it crushed him. For 2 decades, the empire he believed he built, the legacy he thought he commanded, it had all been a stage she had prepared, waiting for the perfect collapse. And then she revealed the cruelest truth. The kidnapping of his daughter? The threats? The betrayal from his own allies? All orchestrated by her. Every ally who abandoned him had been turned long ago. The kidnapping had never placed the girl in real danger. She had arranged it to expose his desperation. You never outplayed me, she whispered. I've been 20 moves ahead since the day I walked free. He screamed, lunging at her in blind rage. But she didn't flinch. From the shadows, figures emerged, men loyal to her, silent and efficient. They restrained him easily, forcing him to his knees. She crouched, staring into his wild, broken eyes. I could kill you now, and it would mean nothing. True punishment isn't death. It's knowing you lost 20 years ago and never realized it. She stood, turning her back on him, leaving him in the circle of candles and photographs. As she walked out, the men closed in. The last sound echoing through the villa was his scream, rage, despair, terror, all colliding into one final, haunting cry. The world never heard from him again. No trial, no escape, no body. He was simply gone, erased like a stain wiped clean. But sometimes, late at night, whispers spread through the city of a figure in the shadows, a woman who had mastered the art of patience and vengeance, who could wait decades to strike. A ghost of justice. And she? She moved on with her life, finally free, yet carrying a truth no one else knew. Revenge hadn't just destroyed him. It had remade her,